One of the more mysterious areas of the economy is the role of the Fed. Formerly known as the Federal Reserve, the Fed is the gatekeeper of the U.S. economy. It is the central bank of the United States. It is the bank of banks. Why do we need the Fed? Before the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, there were over 3,000 different currencies floating around in the United States. Currency could be issued by almost anyone. Even drugstores issued their own notes. The Fed regulates financial institutions, acts as the U.S. government's bank, acts as a bank's bank, and is responsible for managing the nation's money. The Fed has two divisions. One group, the Board of Governors, is responsible for setting monetary policy and managing the nation's money. The other group, the 12 regional reserve banks, acts as a service division that carries out the policy and oversees financial institutions. The Regional Reserve Bank represents the private sector. Both of these groups have the same goals. In its role as money manager, the Fed has two primary goals: maintain stable prices and ensure maximum employment and production output. It achieves these goals indirectly by raising or lowering short-term interest rates. Although these are two separate goals, the outcome of each is the same: a stable economy. In the following sections, we will discuss the goals and the way the Fed goes about achieving them.
Loanable funds represents the money commercial banks and lending institutions that is available to lend out to firms and households to finance expenditures, investment, or consumption. The y-axis represents the real interest rate. The loanable funds market therefore recognizes the relationships between real returns on savings and real price of borrowing, with the public's willingness to save and borrow.
The deposited money that the bank holds is called the bank's liabilities, because they might have to give it back at any time. When banks lend money out, it is categorized as an asset because it is assumed that the bank will be receiving the money back and with extra interest, which will be their profit. Banks can lend out money because they assume that not everyone will want to take all their money back at the same time. However, banks are required to hold some percent of deposits in cash. This is called the required reserve rate, which is normally around 10%. On the other hand, since at lower real interest rates, households and firms will be less inclined to save and more inclined to borrow and spend, the demand for loanable funds reflects an inverse relationship. At higher interest rates, households prefer to delay their spending and put their money in savings, since the opportunity cost of spending now rises with the real interest rates. Basically, banks can create money. They do this through the money multiplier process. To understand this concept, you need to understand some technical terms and the purpose of banks. Banks provide a safe place for people to put their money, and pay a small amount of interest to the depositor on their money. Banks make their profit by loaning these deposits out and charging an interest rate on the loan. The difference between the interest rate that the bank receives and the interest rate that the bank pays is their profit. Normally, the interest paid to the depositors is less than the interest rate charged on loans. The money banks lend out goes through a process called the money multiplier process. It works like this. First, person 1 deposits a sum of money, let's just say $1,000, to Bank A. Assuming that the required reserve ratio is 10%, the bank will keep $100 in reserves and lend out $900 to person 2. This person then spends the money, and then that $900 is put into Bank B. Bank B will keep $90 in reserves and lend out another $10, which will eventually be deposited into Bank C, which will lend out 90% of that. This process keeps going until there is no money left. As you can see, the original $1,000 that person 1 owns has created $900 for person B, and $810 for person C, and so on. So money has been created because of banks. This is great. The equation for the money multiplier process is the original amount of money divided by the required reserve ratio rate. So, in a perfect world with no cash holding, the original $1,000, if entered into the equation, will turn into $10,000. Wow! However, people holding cash is bad. It decreases the money multiplier. If person B holds $400 and deposits $500 instead of $900, the total multiplier will be less than expected. In a perfect world, the money multiplier would be 10. However, it normally hovers around 2 because of cash holdings and many other possible factors.
I'm a sound of the beat, female, born bad and she bad. Dubai, where there's one table time.